the Niviuk Arrow. Got a few little niggles to point out about it. Got a few little niggles to point out about it.
Let's party.
I'll just get one thing out of the way. I really like this harness a lot personally, so my bias, just like my objectivity's out of the window there, because I'm really enjoying this harness a lot. But there are a few points about it that got a few little niggles to point out about it, and also just pros and cons, differences between with other harnesses that have different strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, I always say there's not one bit of equipment that's right and best for everyone. People often say, which is the best, this, and really it's about looking at the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses of each different part of the gear, and then weighing those up to see what suits you, your flying style and your preferences best. With the Arrow, the real strengths is the absolutely supreme comfort that it gives. It's really amazingly comfortable. I think I'm going to go as far as saying it's the most comfortable semi-light pod harness to fly with that I've ever flown with. It's super comfortable. I also really like a lot of the design features, which I'll go into bit by bit. From a comfort point of view in the air, actually on the ground as well, it's very good as well. But in the air, it's supremely comfortable. It's clear Niviuk have decided to prioritise comfort with this harness over other things, which will become clear later. And it is around just a bit over 4 kilos, so it is actually a semi-light pod. Some other supposedly semi-light pods are a bit heavier. Yeah, so it's actually a pretty good weight, and it's quite surprising the rigidity in this back. I think they've actually managed to even surpass the Advanced Lightness 3, which for me until now has been the most comfortable of the semi-light pods. Also, the handling of this harness is absolutely superb. It's a fantastic harness. It's a really great balance. It's a bit more on the weight shifty side, so it's more aimed at somebody who prefers a bit more weight shifty. So it's more weight shifty than say the Supair Delight 4 and also the lightness, but less weight shifty than say the Genie Light 3 and the Genie X Light, which I put on the more weight shifty side. And similar to the Woody Valley GTO Light 2, which is quite similar to the 1, but I'd say that the Arrow has some of the best authority that I think any semi-light pod harnesses goes. No, I'm going to go further. I think it has the best authority that of any current semi-light pod harness that I've tried. It has a feeling that's similar more to a weightier harness like an Impress 4, which is still one of my very favourite harnesses overall, and it has that kind of authority, or even a competition harness. It's got, Niviuk have clearly taken that kind of comfort and stability, but with authority that you get with heavier harnesses like that are more towards the competition side, like the Impress 4, the Woody Valley X-Rated 7, other harnesses like that. They have chosen clearly to compromise some other aspects of semi-light pods. It's not the most compact, in fact it's one of the more, like its packing size is one of the more bulky, and also yeah, it's not the lightest, but the main thing is just that it doesn't fold right in half and fold right down to a very small size. So that's really the biggest, say, con or weakness of the Arrow and the Hawk, which is very similar, is that because Niviuk have decided to prioritise this comfort and structural rigidity, this kind of lengthways rigidity, which gives the harness exceptionally good comfort and control, that has compromised particularly the pack size and a little bit the weight. Let's talk a little bit about build quality. Well, I think the Arrow Niviuk really have taken a jump up with their harnesses. The build quality is really fantastic. It's now starting to rival Advance, who are still just in a league of their own, but the build quality has taken a jump up, and it is superb. I think it is definitely, the build quality is now probably only second to Advance. Sorry, Niviuk, but I mean, that's It's really more saying how amazing the build quality is advanced, but actually the build quality is really fantastic. And I've been using this harness now for several months, and a lot. And if you know me from flying, I run and jump around a lot, so I do tend to put a bit more wear on the kit from that point of view. Then again, I do take care of my kit very well, so it does last. You wouldn't really know that I've had this harness for several months and flown with it a lot. I mean, I've not had any sort of crash landings or anything like that at all. The usual kind of wear points, you can see this harness has really lasted very well. The usual kind of places that you tend to see wear around the leg straps here. Some other harnesses you'll see wear around that sort of area. Also where all the Speedbag attachments are, and the actual Speedbag itself, also known as the pod or the leg fairing. I mean, look at that, it's really in amazing condition. Oh damn, some of you are going to say, how many flights have you had and how many hours? So I don't know exactly, but I've been flying it for several months since they very first came out, and I have flown with it a lot. Obviously I do change and fly different harnesses, so it's not the same as somebody who's only flying one harness, and if they're flying it a lot, they'll fly it more. But I have flown it and used it a lot, so I can't really quantify that, sorry. But it's certainly not, it's got to be at least 50 hours, and bearing in mind as well that I do a lot of running around and ground handling, which actually puts more wear on the harness. I'm also quite keen on things like wingovers and things like that, which put a bit more stress on the gear, but it's lasted really well. So I think clearly Niviuk have again decided to prioritise, rather than making the lightest possible weight, they've decided to prioritise durability, thinking about the target pilot group. Looking at some more details, the Arrow, well, it's a stunningly good looking harness. I think could be argued this is the best looking semi-light pod harness there is, with the Advanced Lightness 3 and the 4 now coming out as well. But it's a very, very good looking harness. It has a really nice shape. It's the build quality, the materials are all beautiful, colours are really nice, and of course that's a matter of opinion, but I do think they've made a really elegant looking design, and of course beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but I think most people will agree this is a very nice looking harness. The tail fairing is a nice size. It's not huge, sort of cumbersome, but it's also not too small, so I think it definitely has an effect. And I'll talk about that later, but yeah, it definitely has an effect, and it inflates very nicely. Niviuk have chosen to put, I believe it's a couple of nitinol rods here that I can feel in here. There's a couple of rods, nitinol rods running in, and so they have done that, which does seem to contribute to the tail being pulled out and inflating. And as usual with these pods, there's with the tail fairing, there's a construction inside which is very much like the internal structure of a paraglider. I'll just open it up and show you that. One-handed, just because I'm holding the camera, and I won't show you the internal structure after all because you can't see it with this one. Some harnesses like the Impress 4 you can see right into the internal structure, but in any case what's in there is very similar to the internal construction of a paraglider. So they've got the sort of ribs with holes in them for ventilation, and that helps shape and inflate the back. And then if you look in the back now, it gives you an opportunity to show you the storage, and it's quite a generous storage. It's not massive, it's not as big as say the Ozone BV1, because it's obviously aimed more at Volbiv, and that's absolutely huge storage, but it's certainly more generous than some. And I don't know if you can see here, but it kind of goes underneath there, so they've really tried to maximise the space that you've got. So it's quite a generous storage. There's a pocket here to put your camel back in, and then another zip pocket there just for you to put your keys and stuff in. That'd be a good idea. I should actually make use of that. So there's that. They actually supply the harness with a couple of spare stiffeners, and those are to do with the they've made the stiffness here for the ventilation holes easily replaceable. Smart move. And that goes in there on both sides, and that must contribute to the really good inflation of the harness. You can see they've got a little bit squished over time. Something else I really do like a lot about the Arrow is the flight deck. It's the cockpit flight deck, again, whatever you want to call it. I call it a flight deck, and it's the thing that's integrated into the Speedbag, and it sits really, really nicely, better than most. In fact, I think it might be about the best of the flight decks. It sits very nicely solidly. The position is just absolutely perfect, without needing to fiddle about and try and do stuff with straps and stuff like that. And also it's got a very nice size panel here. I'm using this because I'm swapping kit a lot. In any case, it's a good idea. I'm using this Cortel flight panel, and that panel there, because I'm always swapping kit, and also it means when you've got multiple instruments like this, you can just quickly stick it on, take it off, and that's secured. There's a lanyard that's built into the flight panel, 3 lanyard holders, and so I just clip that onto there for security, like so, and that works really nicely. Other things I really like about this cockpit is the way it opens. I mean, for me for me, this is how I want all cockpits to be. So the fact that it has this panel that's so easy to just open and access in flight, look at that, it's brilliant. And there's really nice space in here. They've put pretty damn optimum compartments, and with a couple of places here. I mean, it's good for me, I put my camera batteries in there because I have to sometimes change batteries in flight, which is always a bit of a fiddle. And then you can put your snacks, your power bank, and like that. And while I'm mentioning that, you can see here the cable, there's two power bank holes, a little bit tight, but I guess it fits fine. It's a bit tight to get your cable through, but it fits fine. There's one there and one there. I mean, the way that this flight deck is for using, the way the instruments mount, the way it opens, the pockets inside, and it's even got a little bit of a stiffening button here to make it stiffer. The way this all is pretty damn optimum, as far as I'm concerned. Usually with flight decks I'm always frustrated to a certain degree, but with this one I think it's like, I rather like that. The way that it fixes, I'll show later, is that Niviuk have decided to do something that you tend to see more on competition harnesses, where they've put 2 straps rather than 1 clip going to the waist strap, which quite a lot of brands are doing nowadays, which works, but I find it a bit fiddly, and I don't know if it's optimum. I mean, it does work, and it's definitely, that makes the instruments, the flight deck, sit nicely on your waist strap. So I think having some sort of clip to hold the flight deck on top of your waist strap is a very good idea. But what I think is, I think this is optimum. This is really good. Niviuk have a strap that runs up to each of the shoulder straps. So there's 2 straps, and they clip on to the shoulder straps. So yes, that does mean there's 2 straps to clip on. So I just leave the right hand side looks like the left as I'm facing it, but the right hand side clipped all the time, because that's the side the Speedbag's attached to. And then I only have to do up the left side, so that's the same as when they got a clip on the waist strap, and it's less fiddly, it's easier to do up, and it also makes the flight deck sit better. So I like it. The one sort of downside of the Arrow is because of this rigidity and how they've designed the harness, it's not designed to be, it's not like a clamshell phone. It's not got a clamshell design, and it's not made to be folded in half. You can do it, and I have tried doing that, but it's really not, it's not optimum, it's not best for the harness. I've stopped doing that now. I tried it for a bit and it doesn't seem to have affected the harness too much, but it clearly prefers to be left longer like that. And then you end up with a flight deck here, and it does fold flat. I've got things in it at the moment, but it does fold flat. And you end up putting your glider on top of that, and you can see here that one thing it's ended up with is a bit of a dent on the side there. When you fill it up, that fills up, but there's one little thing there. If any pilots out there found some genius technique for packing that stops that dent hole happening, let us know. So here, looking at the seats, so looking at the seat pack, you can see it's got a full seat board. It's not just a mini seat board. It's got full, the full seat board here that goes back, right back to here, right round, all the way around. There's a bit of soft on the front, which is really smart because that means you don't have a seat board digging into the back of your legs. Other harness manufacturers, take note. That really makes a big difference. You don't have the board bang in. Also, this is a lightweight, it's a lightweight board in there. I'm guessing it's the honeycomb type material. Yeah, it's that kind of honeycomb material. Oh, it looks like it's inside a sleeve of material. I don't know if you can see that. So here there's a board in there, and that's all nicely all the way around. So I think the fact that the seat board, the way it's designed, how it fits all really nicely inside this sleeve of material, the fact that it has this soft part on the front, and the fact that it's relatively lightweight, I think those things all combine to make it actually very comfortable on the ground, more so than a lot of full seat boarded harnesses, and some other slightly heavier and full seat boarded harnesses. Definitely you feel like the seat board's banging to the back of your legs. The Genie Light 3 comes to mind. Fantastic harness, don't get me wrong, it's a great harness, but it's definitely heavier, and you got that seat board thing banging in the back of your legs compared to this. This feels like quite similar to the Delight 4 with its mini seat board, and almost not that far off even a hammock style harness in terms of comfort, and from that sort of comfort on the ground point of view. So really good, big thumbs up there. So the comfort, even right across the bum and the back, is just superb. Moving on to the next bit, under the seat, there's actually quite a nice storage pocket under here, and again it's pretty optimally placed and designed, I think. So yeah, it goes in there nicely, and I put my concertina bag, my helmet bag and all soft things in there, and yeah, that's really great bonus for storage space. So that adds an extra, I'm not exactly sure how much volume that is, but it looks like several litres, maybe even 10 to be honest. It's quite a good space. And here you can see underneath is the protector, so that, I mean, also by filling this pocket with soft stuff, that's basically adding extra protection for you, so that's a great idea. I mean, avoid putting hard things under your bum, but you can fill that up with all your soft stuff. And here's the protector, which is a foam protector. As I've mentioned before, I personally prefer a really good foam protector, just because a lot of it's down to practicality. I don't inflatable protectors seem to be offering potentially the best protection, certainly at least on first impact and until they pop, but foam protectors just don't need inflating and deflating. They don't puncture, and so I like them from that practical point of view. And I definitely prefer a compressible foam protector like this compared to a more rigid type of protector. So some rigid protectors apparently get better results in the tests and end up being a bit thinner. For example, the Neocoraid, and I honestly personally prefer this kind of protector. I just feel like, and I think it's a balance. Everything's a compromise. So I think if you look at things in just one sort of extreme way or the other, which one gives you the best protection, you know, and which one does best in the tests, or which one's the most compact. If you just look at one factor, then you'll arrive probably at a certain conclusion. But what I tend to do is to look at all the factors and then look at it as a compromise and a balance. For me, that's what I personally do. So now, just looking in the Speedbag, I really like the way that Niviuk, at first it took me a little bit to get my head around it, I must admit. Actually, when we first got these harnesses, they were supplied, not assembled, so I had to assemble them. Now I'm glad to say they deliver them assembled, and there's a nice adjustment system. I think this personally is the best kind of adjustment system, where you have lines with knots on them, and then you can do a Lark's head knot onto the different parts. That's very easy to loosen and move up and down, and it does not slip. So I rather like this. They've also put little tags on there to make it a bit easier to sort of undo the loops when you want to move them. It seems to give a very easy adjustment. It's very solid, durable. You can see, looking at it, unlike quite a lot of pods, the attachments here even after several months and quite a lot of usage. All the attachment points are still really good, they're lasting really well, and there's no issue whatsoever with any kind of slippage. So there's no slipping. The harness, the pod's not like lost its length and started slipping and had to be readjusted the whole time we've used it, which most other pods do. Some other pods use the same kind of system with knots and lark's head loops like that, so it's not the only one. So that, I think it's a really good way. Others use kind of buckles or things like the sort of tent kind of devices which you have to kind of like work up and are really fiddly. This is really nice. It's simple, it works, it lasts, it's very lightweight, pretty good. Looking inside the Speedbag, you can see here it comes with this integrated 3-step speed bar, Speedsystem, and that seems to work really nicely, and they've clearly put quite a bit of work into the design of all of this. You can see 2 bungees at the bottom, spot on, that holds it nicely in place, and then there's these different 3 steps here, and you can see they've even made little webbing bits on the corners there so that they sit nicely, they don't all bend around. You didn't have those that start to all get bent up and twist up. Slight attention to detail like that, which is great. Another point I'm going to point out here that I really like, which I'd like to see more manufacturers doing, is the adjustment down here. This is great. This is the system that I've always wanted here, which is they've put an adjustable Brummel hook down below, or what's like an adjustable Brummel hook, same sort of idea. It's not a Brummel hook, it's just a loop that's got these 3 holes in it, and it means the adjustment is done down here, and you can very easily adjust this. You haven't got to do complicated knots or anything like that, and it's very tidy. It's all down here. Tidy that out of the way if you want, and yeah, that works really nicely. I think that's a great system. Doesn't slip, easy to adjust, tidy, out of the way, minimalist, but works really well. You can see then the speed routing goes through underneath through here, and they've put, you see how here and all these points here, it's like there's a wear point, they've put reinforcement over there. Then the speed bar lines go through these little ceramic low friction rings, which I think are okay. Generally I don't like to see those on the risers with the brakes, because people who are too aggressive on the brakes can wear holes in, but I think for the Speedsystem it seems to be fine, and you don't have as many iterations as you do with the brakes on the Paraglider. So that runs in through there, and that comes out of the side through another guiding ceramic ring, which runs along the side here into a nice 20mm Ronstand ball bearing pulley. So here you can see, just to get an idea of the storage, I do carry a bit more stuff I think than most, but not so excessive today. Yeah, I've got a backpack. This is the Niviuk Cargo 160, which is I think the perfect bag for this. Is the Arrow size large. I think it is also for the medium. I think this is the perfect bag. That goes in here. With the backpack, it's like a little bit of a kind of space underneath. I push it right under there to make the best use of space. Then there's my bag with all my gubbins and camera gear in there. I tend to take as many of the hard things out as possible and put them in the flight deck. And I don't need my jacket today. Not staying up, I'm more likely to get very hot and sweaty by the looks of it. So that fits in there. So just to show you this, I mean, even with that, lots of stuff in there, and then I'm putting my jacket in the back, I've still got a good amount of space still left. In the back pocket, there's also the side pockets, so there's one on the other side of the harness similar. I would have liked these pockets to be a bit bigger, Niviuk. Yeah, I would like those pockets, especially since like my camera pole that I have is it's a bit long when it folds down and doesn't quite fit in. So the other day I was going on a camera pole and I couldn't do up the zip, and I dropped my camera pole on the hill and then spent hours, well, a while looking for it. Somebody else found it, thank you. But yeah, so small creases, I like that, to see that a little deeper, but I don't know, maybe that's fine for most. and there's the same pocket on that side. And to be fair as well, the pockets are nicely aligned, useful, and they face the right direction. Some harnesses have the pockets such that when you're in flight, the pocket's facing back, so things would fall out the back of them. So that's, yeah, good compromise. Or when you're on the ground, they face the wrong way and things would fall out. So, and I think it's good that these aren't zipped. Some again have pockets that aren't zipped up, and again you can end up dropping stuff. Also, while we're up here, the shoulder straps I find really very supremely comfortable. Maybe they could have a little bit more padding in them, but I guess that would just make them more chunky. They sit really nicely. Some harnesses, just if you don't have the waist strap, the chest strap, sorry, if you don't have the chest strap done up, they just fall off. And even with the chest strap on, they're a real pain, and they tend to just slip off like that. And on the ground, they can be a bit of pain. And to be honest, even in the air, they're a little bit kind of slip off, and you feel like you're going to slip out of the back of the harness. You don't, but it feels that way. I think these are really nicely shaped and designed. Niviuk have done a really good balance here. So for me, the Arrow, the Niviuk Arrow is just a supremely comfortable semi-light pod harness, and I think it's a bit in a league of its own in the semi-light pod harnesses in that way. From my testing, and in my opinion, it's pretty amazing. The kind of comfort and control and support it gives you is something you'd expect from a much heavier harness. So for example, still one of my favourite harnesses of all time is the Advanced Impress 4, and this has that similar kind of level of support and comfort to that, but this weighs a bit over 4 kilos instead of 6.5 kilos, so it's 2 kilos lighter. But of course the Impress 4 offers you the possibility of fitting 2 reserves in it, so it's a kind of a different level of harness, really. Ironically, the Impress 4 actually folds more compactly than this, so you end up, the Impress 4 can fit in a 130 litre backpack, whereas this, for the length, not really because of the volume, but for the length of it, you need a long backpack. You end up putting the harness, the glider, what I call old style, put the glider back inside the harness. It's not a harness, you wrap the glider around this. You put that there, so you end up needing a longer backpack really than a bigger. So that's why I've ended up using Niviuk's Cargo 160. It's for the length, not the volume. So I find the Speedsystem pretty easy to get your foot on and then use. You do, like all these Speedsystems, you need to just work out and put your foot in the right place and work out where it is. But it's pretty easy to use because of the routing of it and the pulleys and where everything's positioned. That's really vitally important. Obviously it depends on the glider, but relatively speaking it's light, it has a very good feeling and a very good usability. So big thumbs up on the Speedsystem too. Looking at the adjustments, little metal buckles. Now, I have over time found that I needed to readjust them a little bit, but they've stayed pretty well in place. The sitting position I find really good. It is a little bit more on the laid back side compared to say the Speedsystem Delight 4, which is definitely got a bit more of a sit upright thing. So this is in that way a bit more supine, quite similar to some of the other harnesses like the Lightness 3 and the Genie Light 3 and also the Woody Valley GTO 2. So they're quite similar to that sort of position. It's not like a full comp really laid back harness, and it's not as laid back as the Forza 2, which is more laid back, although they've brought out an update to that to correct that and allow you to be a bit more upright as well. But this is kind of that. It is definitely made to be a pod in a fairly supine position, but it's not extreme, so it's quite accessible. The feeling of it, the weight shift, the stability, the simplicity of the design and use, I think that the Arrow and the Hawk are very good as first pod harnesses. I still think that the Speedsystem Delight 4 is a really very good because of that more upright sitting position. It's a particularly good first pod, but I think the Arrow is an excellent choice as well. The leg straps, they're quite slim but with a bit of padding on them. I haven't noticed them, and they are quite slim, but and not a lot of padding, but I haven't noticed them being sort of chaffing too much or anything like that. When you have the leg straps integrated into the waist strap, into this kind of that shape like that, then that's a get-up system, and you've got the safety system and everything in one, so it's all sort of in 2 clips. The benefit of this is obviously simplicity. That's one key thing. The other thing is on the ground, you haven't got straps going across your legs, so there's more freedom of movement. It's easier to move around. I really like that. This is my preferred system. If you're finding these straps pinching a lot, you're probably standing on any harness, then you're probably standing too upright. And so you should try and adjust your technique there. So I think the buckles, Cobra buckles, very high quality, and they seem to work really nicely. They're very easy to do up, and they've got a system, so if you push on one side, it doesn't undo, you have to push both together and then it undoes. Looking at the reserve system, you can see there's a nice simple handle touched there by a little bit of Velcro. It's very, very cleanly done and all tidy away. In fact, you can't really see much of it. It's kind of a bit tricky to do your checks of your reserve pins because it's all hidden away, but it does sit very nicely. I've had no issues whatsoever. It's just sat there perfectly ever since I've put the reserve in, and yeah, no problem whatsoever. Also for testing deployments, it comes out nicely, easy to grab, and it's easy to pull out. It opens out very generously like that, and there's really no issue whatsoever of getting your reserve out. Harness does come with integrated reserve bridles, nice light Dynamo bridles. One little niggle that I have is that quite a few manufacturers, they're stitched in. You haven't got the option to remove these, so if you want to fit a steerable reserve, you can fit a steerable reserve. They've made the loops big enough, same as Advanced and other manufacturers. They made sure the loops are big enough so that you can attach your connectors, most likely Maillons generally used. You can attach those there to fit a steerable reserve like a Beamer 3 or a Charlie Diamond or Target Cross. Yeah, an important point I just wanted to make about the Arrow is that I found, because of the really good control and stability of the harness, and although it is a more supine harness, I found it's really good for doing SIV type stuff on there. It's very, very nice control, so I think it's very solid and robustly built, so I feel very happy doing SIV type testing and manoeuvres on the harness. And it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic for doing wingovers and semi-aerobatic kind of stuff, and yeah, really nice like that. The control and feeling you have with it is just superb, so really, really good for that. Another point to know is that you can actually remove the seat board if you want and make it into a hammock style harness, so that is removable on flight like that. And it also makes the harness a bit narrower. If you're very slim, then that can be something that you might want to do. If you're trying to decide between the Hawk and the Arrow, well, obviously the Arrow's got the rear fairing is pretty much the only difference, I believe, so that's really the main difference. The amount of storage in the back I think is the same, and everything else is the same. So really it's a case of, if you prefer having the rear fairing for more performance. Some say as well there is a thought that rear fairing gives you more yaw stability, particularly if you're flying around accelerated a lot. I don't think you notice it so much just in normal flight. Speaking of liquids, ballast container, this pocket under here you can use as a ballast container. I prefer to use it just for putting my stuff in, but if I do want to carry a bit of extra weight, if I'm testing a bigger glider that can hold ballast, then apparently in the size large 7 litres, drinks bag goes into there, and then the tube runs through here nicely through that. Last of all, relating to liquids, you've drunk and now you need to pee. Pee tube hole there. For landing, it's very easy to get your feet out of the pod and get yourself into a good position and get your legs down and land. Shoulder straps on, just the right size loops here, so you can see it's all very tidy and nicely done. Another factor that I'm glad to see, if you're watching a video, you would have seen me talking about having I think all pod harnesses should have a bungee on them, and actually this harness I've needed it the least of very many harnesses, so I'm really glad to see that Niviuk have done that. I also have to point out they've done it right. The bungee is on the right hand side, which is the side of the top flap, and it's attached to one side, not in the middle. So what that means is it's off to the side. You can see I put it on the outside of my right foot, so that means when I launch I stick my right foot out And that also has the effect of opening the top flap, like so. It opens the gap there and makes it even easier to then put my left foot into the speed bags. And that means with this system I never ever need to fiddle with my brakes or struggle to get into the pod. Even if I completely ram the back of this harness, I totally fill it up and stuff it, as much stuff in it as I can, it doesn't affect the comfort of the harness at all, and it doesn't affect me getting into the speed bag at all. With some harnesses there's a problem if you put stuff in the back, and then it pushes you out of the harness and then makes it difficult, one, uncomfortable in the harness, and difficult to get into the speed bag, which is what I showed with the Genie X Lite. So who is the Arrow for? Well, I think it's for a very wide range of pilots, because it offers such good comfort and ease of use, simplicity. Definitely one to consider as a first pod. The weight shift level is not too unstable. It's a nice balance of stable but with good weight shift control, and a very kind of smooth feeling, supreme comfort, very good protection for this level harness. For a semi-light pod, I think the protection is very good, and also the build quality and the robustness is good, so it's suitable as well from that point of view. So definitely one to consider as a first pod, as well as the Sup Air Delight 4, and of course there are other options as well, but those two I think are particularly good options. Yeah, and I've not really noticed too much of a problem with the buckles, the straps pinching or anything like that. Yeah, I think it's not really affected me over the years, no.